Chapter 2, We the Living. Okay people, chop chop, the project manager Steven starts. His voice is loud and forward, but still competing with the ticker tape sound of a movie projector behind him. Thumbs are up from Proto Labs. Things are looking good with beta production. We're swimming, treading water. We're where we should be, not where we want to be. So let's keep it up. Keep it up and we could be at full scale by Christmas season. Cha-ching! He's young, a few years younger than me even, and fierce. His position as project manager is lucky, but not entirely undeserved. I was running slightly late, but I know he was early. Shoes were polished, shirt continents through traditional recording devices. But we had no way to point the lens at Earth. We'd have to establish base light years away to even capture what happened proportionately long ago. It was a complete mess. The executives changed their scope, and financiers always seemed to scare easily. Every time the project was nearly bagged, they came up with some new add-on, some new way to enhance the experience. Initially, as usual, it was a top-secret military project to try and spy on enemy continents through traditional recording devices. But we had no way to point the lens at Earth. We'd have to establish base light years away to even capture what happened proportionately long ago. It was a complete mess. But creative operators then saw they could record the creation and destruction of solar systems if they zoomed out and waited long enough. A few decades later came the appropriate lenses to zoom in and pan around the surfaces of these planets. And a few more years later, and we had the storage capacity to do something with all this data, to compile and predict and infer things. But the traditional digital formats were rough to work with. Olden style, large format, black and white film ended up having the highest fidelity capture, as it wasn't bound to pixels and rigorously compressed values. It was analog. It saturates and decays evenly in the light, burning out hollows in the glossy tape. They are bounced to digital later after I process the film for a color space. I use fine colorimetry and ocular devices to divine the appropriate palette. I go back to one of the recording lenses and see what it captured over last night. First, I check for oversaturation and focal length. As I slowly dial in the coarse focus, I can almost see it. There is much blue here, I just know it. The dainty, fine focus knob tightens as far as it can go, and the lines almost come in. The red lines spring out of the blue with little splotches of green. If I had to guess, I'd say it was a pack of large blue bird of a sort with red underfeathers. They're grazing some muddy-looking vegetation under red skies. I nudge the color wheel slightly, and the birds become green, with blue underfeathers and orange around the eyes, under a blue sky. The executives will like this. It's less frightening? Well, it's more human. At first I was against the idea of altering the color. It had to be pure, I pleaded. But several glad hands reassured me that it was much more sensible and easily identifiable. What they meant to say was marketable. I guess at this point, after all we've seen out there, it's hard not to take it partially for granted. We've seen it all. Animals and wild foliage, deep fertile seas, intelligent life, adept cultures and customs. Blurry, silent films of what could have been. The problem, of course, was that we couldn't quite get the picture right. The non-particle element of light was washing out the fine detail. No matter how detailed and intricate the lens, the nature of the sensor cannot be adjusted to appropriately cancel out the noise, this murmur of uncertainty. And of course, it was in black and white. The larger epistemic problem was that we could see them at all. We could watch helplessly millions of years later. but we cannot interact with these worlds or warn them of the peril to come. We're recording millions of years too late. How could we? When we extrapolate forward, we can see plain and clear the death of all this great wealth of life. And while we have seen civilizations enter the dark of space, we have never seen a species meaningfully colonize a second planet. We watch the frenzy of these blurry, vague lives wither away in the wake of time. We, the living, stand in awe with our arms folded. "Did you get to the end?" Carl butts in, startling me from my watchful contemplation. "This one is a particularly nice one." I run the tape forward, and the lens starts to shift its focal length and diameter. The reel is thinning, so I slow the playback, and I see it. Another planet from out of frame careens into this one. It's so fast. There are terrible fires that yin-yang into the calm skylines. Fragments cluster and separate, spinning into the silent darkness of space, still splintering apart from their rotational forces. Fingers of electricity shock the air along the intersecting plane, unsure of which body to ground onto. Chaos. "Yeah, I thought it was a good one," Carl starts again, breathing heavy. He had neon orange processed food crumbs on his hands trapped within the surface tension of his sweat. This was routine. It was pretty improbable. It's not every century that you see two rocks that big hit each other, especially one with stable life, I say evenly. A shame about the birds, though. "Birds? I thought those were lava flows or something. They were too fluid to be some clumsy birds." I always know when I'm looking something in the eye. They're birds. Of some sort, I say very assuredly. I was paid to be sure. Why not start now? "See, that's why you're the man. You have the eye for this sort of thing. The imagination." He emphasizes the last phrase with opening his hands and waving his fingers down through the air, and with a whooshing sibilance. I wince distastefully. I always thought having a good imagination was sort of a euphemism for being insane. When I was first coloring all those many years ago, I was an artist. By the time I was in middle school, I was already becoming imaginative. I had notebooks filled with geometric outlines to color in when I got home, stories to write, and a world of vibrations and waveforms bombarding me with sensory information. While everyone I knew became a medical professional or a lawyer, I stayed home and played with mirrors and lenses. And around this time I met the deepest rolling oscillation of fate, favor, and fortune. Rainy-eyed Cassandra. She was a year older than me. We met the summer of her senior year of high school. We were at a mutual friend's house, late at night during a party, taking care of all the sick drunks together and managing the damage. She was so sweet, she really cared. She was taking off their shoes and folding blankets over them. We sat on the balcony until 6 a.m., watching shooting stars and the fireworks in our corrupted consciousnesses. I held her hand, and we shared our body heat in the thin morning air. She saw something in me, something otherworldly, but also something wrong. And while she believed in me, both parts of me, she didn't know which one would win. My soft yet lovable insanity, or that vague dark smear, like a foul presence that clings to my thoughts and actions. "Saul," Cheryl starts, trying to get my attention without startling me. I must have picked it up from the financiers. Saul, you're late for the luncheon. I know you can hear me." I find myself at the chromatotransmogrifier table, an expensive scientific research bench which acts as a full bandwidth light function generator. Its layout is similar to a piano, with latching keys that hold characteristics to the light. But in the center there is an amphitheater, which produces a refined beam of spectrum-scoped light. The machine is essentially a repurposed tone generator, which reproduces tonal waveforms at varying intensities and frequencies. Except here, these functions are attached to a high power and radically sensitive bulb. This now focuses into a lens to create one steady beam of light. I had different color splotches with me and was stacking them, painting the light with smears of these bizarre and ill colors. I had added up an ugly pinkish brown. Why? When did I get here? I remember watching the tape, and Cassandra. I must have lost time again. Thanks, Cheryl. She screams a little to my abrupt response. I'll be right behind you. I just have to stop by the little chromatics room. She chuckles a little, nervously, and leaves the door jamb. Her heels clack down the hallway, like blips on radar, permeating the air. I take my ugly sample and quickly flip through the various spectra of light on this light generator. Nothing interesting. I go to the master control panel around the corner behind the lead wall. I flip the switches for auxiliary power, juicing this tone of light through the DC-AC inverters, and the light strengthens frighteningly loud and hot. I invert the lens sensor and have it read the nothingness between the spray of light. Thousands of frames of film erode to construct the backscatter. I power down the machine and quickly run these images through the processing computer. Nothing interesting. I just lost time and was pretending to work, I guess. Sleepwalking, daywalking, whatever. This does happen to me from time to time. I've been a little stressed lately. I take my job rather seriously. I take my life rather seriously. I exercise regularly, eat somewhat healthy. I attend lectures and keep up on the most recent publications for my field. I just sort of phase out now and again. Most of me was here doing one thing, but one of the parts of me, one of the ones Cassandra talked about, was off somewhere else. Just way, way out there. I lean back and nudge a key on the transmogrifier, and the computer quietly starts to add more base pink and brown, and then forward deduces the negative values. The product was a wavering grayscale. It hurt my eyes. I zoom the focus in and start to finally adjust the image as far as I could go. It was static. I start to feel ill. I put my jacket on and gather my pertinent papers into my briefcase and promptly leave. I'm shaking. I'm worried. I'm certain Cheryl is worried too. She was a sweet woman, an older executive secretary who is the office mom. That is, she makes sure all the kids play nice in the sandbox. As for Steven and the rest of the firm, they'll just have to understand. I mean, I could tell them I lose time, just every now and then, but there would probably be some sort of aversion to the truth, as usual. I can't tell them what happened, what I saw, that through the static, past the focus of the lens, I could see those gray, rainy eyes, millions of them, an entire continuum of them, opening and closing, and all that glinting rain that always seems to roll out of them. It was so bright that when I closed my eyes, I could still see them burned into my eyelids like film. Come on, let's get a grip. You can do this. I try, and I fail again. The year is 2045. I'm Saul Robertson, and I may as well be 5 years old.